traded like cattle to a silent warrior to be shamed. A fire-tongued woman discovers that his quiet respect is a crucible for a love more ferocious and untamed than the Wild West itself. They never spoke her name. To them, she was a stray dog with a sharp bite, a burden to be cast off. The girl with the serpent's tongue, her uncle snarled, shoving her forward into the dust. Seraphina stood ramrod straight, the shame a hot brand on her skin. But her fists were clenched, her spirit a coiled viper ready to strike. The Lakota warrior who stepped from the band of riders didn't look at her like property. His eyes, dark and deep as a midnight river, raked over her, not with pity, but with an unnerving assessment that seemed to strip her bare to the very fire in her soul. He was tall, carved from the harsh land itself, a long, jagged scar slicing under his jaw. They called him Caleb. He said nothing, simply offered a single magnificent hunting knife. A trade. Her life for a blade. No one asked if she agreed. But as he turned and walked away, his broad back a silent command, she followed. Not out of defeat, but because the look in his eyes promised something far more dangerous and alluring than the slow death she was leaving behind. A reckoning. Part 1. The Silence and the Spark. The journey to the Lakota camp was a silent war. Each step Seraphina took was a declaration of defiance. Her boots, worn and cracked, sank into the plains, but her chin remained high, her gaze fixed on the powerful line of Caleb's shoulders. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, utterly at home in the vast, unforgiving landscape. She, in her drab settler's dress, was an alien thing, a broken piece of a world that had discarded her. Yet, she refused to break completely. When they finally reached the camp, a sprawling collection of hide lodges nestled in a cottonwood grove. The smell of wood smoke and roasting meat filled the air. Women paused their work to watch her, their dark eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Children peeked from behind lodges, their whispers like the rustling of dry leaves. Seraphina felt 1,000 eyes on her, judging her, measuring her. She braced herself for the familiar sting of contempt. Caleb led her to a lodge set slightly apart from the others. Inside, a small fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the hide walls. He gestured to a pile of soft buffalo robes, an offering of comfort. Then, he placed a bowl of steaming stew into her hands. Her fingers trembled as she took it, the warmth a shocking contrast to the cold knot of fear in her stomach. She expected him to watch her eat, to assert his ownership. Instead, he turned his back to her, busying himself with unstrapping the gear from his horse just outside the lodge entrance. The gesture was so unexpected it was disorienting. It was a grant of privacy, a small, unspoken courtesy that she hadn't experienced in years. She ate ravenously, the rich, savory broth, a balm to her starved body and frayed nerves. That night, she lay on the buffalo robes, fully clothed, a knife she'd kept hidden in her boot pressed against her thigh. She stared up at the smoke hole, the distant stars like chips of ice in the black sky. She listened to the sounds of the camp settling down, the murmur of voices, the soft nicker of a horse, the cry of a night bird. She waited for Caleb's shadow to fall over her, for his hand to claim the body he had bartered for. He entered the lodge, his silhouette massive against the dying firelight. He moved with a heavy weariness, the day's long ride etched into his posture. Seraphina's heart hammered against her ribs, her breath catching in her throat. He didn't look at her. He simply lay down on his own set of robes on the opposite side of the fire, a chasm of space and silence between them. He was asleep in moments, his breathing deep and even. The tension slowly drained from her body, leaving a confusing emptiness in its wake. This quiet, this profound lack of threat was more unsettling than any cruelty. Cruelty? She understood. She knew its language, its rhythms. This silent respect was a foreign tongue. Days bled into one another, each marked by the same bewildering pattern. Caleb would rise before the sun, his movements economical and precise. He would hunt, tend to his horses, or sit for hours sharpening his blades, his focus absolute. He provided her with food, with shelter, but demanded nothing. He spoke little, And when he did, it was to others in the fluid, melodic cadence of the Lakota language. To her, he offered only silence. But it was a silence thick with unspoken things. She would catch him watching her, his dark eyes intense, unreadable. It wasn't the leering gaze of a man wanting to possess her, but something deeper, more elemental. It felt like he was watching a wild hawk, waiting to see if it would fly away or choose to stay. One afternoon, frustrated by the inactivity and the suffocating weight of his unspoken expectations, she began to clean, scrubbing the stew pot with a fierce energy, sweeping the lodge floor with frantic, angry motions. It was what she knew, how she had always earned her keep, by making herself useful, by trying to outrun the punishment that was always sure to follow any moment of idleness. He stopped his work, his hands stilling on the knife he was honing. He watched her, his head tilted. She expected a command, a correction, an order to do it differently, better. He said nothing. He just watched. Finally, she couldn't bear it. She threw the broom to the ground. "What do you want from me?" she demanded, her voice raw, cracking with the strain of 100 unshed tears. "Why did you bring me here? To watch me scrub your pots like a slave?" Caleb rose slowly to his feet. He walked towards her, and for the first time she saw something flicker in his eyes. Not anger, but perhaps surprise. He stopped a few feet from her, his presence filling the small lodge. "A slave does not have fire in her eyes," he said, his voice a low rumble. The first words he had ever spoken directly to her. "I did not trade for a slave. I traded for the fire." Her breath hitched. The air crackled between them, charged with a sudden, dangerous energy. His gaze dropped to her lips, and for a heart-stopping moment, she thought he would close the distance, that the waiting was finally over. The thought sent a jolt of both terror and a wild, thrilling anticipation through her. He was a man of immense power, of primal grace. To be taken by him would be to be consumed by a force of nature. But he didn't move. He held her gaze for a long moment, a silent battle of wills raging between them, before he turned and left the lodge, leaving her trembling, her heart a wild drum against her ribs. He had not taken what he wanted. He had simply named it. And in doing so, he had lit a spark in the darkness of her soul, a spark that she knew, with a terrifying certainty, could either save her or burn her to ash. Part 2. The Language of a Wild Heart. The fire Caleb had named pulsed within Seraphina, a confusing mix of indignation and a strange, burgeoning pride. No one had ever seen her rage as anything but a flaw. He saw it as her essence. The revelation was a seismic shift in the landscape of her soul. She began to watch him, not with the fearful eyes of a captive, but with the keen observation of an equal. She saw the way the other warriors respected him, the way children flocked to him, drawn to his quiet strength. She saw the gentleness in his powerful hands as he mended a broken arrow or soothed a restless horse. One afternoon she saw him carving a piece of wood. His focus was so complete, it was as if the rest of the world had ceased to exist. His knife moved with an artist's precision, peeling away layers to reveal the shape within. Seraphina found herself drawn to the sight, an unwilling spectator to his quiet creation. She approached slowly, sitting a respectful distance away, her own hands idle for once. He didn't acknowledge her presence, but the rhythm of his carving changed subtly, a slight hesitation in the smooth glide of the blade. He was aware of her. The knowledge sent a shiver down her spine. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was a canvas, and every unspoken word, every shared glance, was a brushstroke painting a picture she was only just beginning to understand. That evening she found the finished carving on her sleeping robes. It was a hawk, its wings half spread, its head cocked as if listening to the wind. It was exquisite, pulsing with a wild, untamed energy. She picked it up, the wood warm and smooth against her palm. It felt like holding a piece of his spirit. She looked across the fire at him, a question in her eyes. He met her gaze, his own dark and intense. "It does not ask for a cage," he said, his voice low and resonant, "but it will return to a hand that offers respect." His words were a key, unlocking a door inside her she thought was rusted shut. He wasn't just offering her a gift. He was offering her a choice. He was telling her that he saw her not as something to be confined, but as something to be revered. A wild, fierce love began to stir in her heart, a love that was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. It was a love that mirrored the untamed land around them, a love that promised both freedom and a ferocious, all-consuming passion. Her relationship with the tribe began to change. An older woman named Awanji, her face a beautiful map of wrinkles, showed Serafina how to grind corn, her gnarled hands guiding Serafina's with surprising gentleness. She taught her words in Lakota, laughing a warm, throaty laugh when Serafina's tongue stumbled over the unfamiliar sounds. The women no longer looked at her with suspicion, but with a growing acceptance. They saw the way Caleb looked at her, the way a palpable energy field seemed to shimmer between them, and they understood. One day, Awanji looked at Serafina, a knowing glint in her eye. "The warrior sees your spirit," she said, "but your heart is a clenched fist. You must learn to open it, little hawk, or you will never truly fly." That night, a storm rolled in, the sky turning a bruised purple-black. Wind howled through the camp, tearing at the lodges. Rain fell in cold, hard sheets. Serafina huddled in the lodge, shivering, the storm outside a mirror of the tempest in her own soul. Caleb entered, dripping wet, his hair plastered to his forehead. He moved to build up the fire, his presence a solid, reassuring anchor in the chaos. He handed her a dry fur, his fingers brushing hers. The touch was electric, a bolt of lightning that shot straight to her core. She gasped, pulling her hand back as if burned. He froze, his eyes locking on hers. The air grew thick, heavy with 1,000 unspoken desires. The storm raged outside, but inside the lodge, a different kind of storm was brewing, one of passion and raw, untamed need. "Why do you flinch from me, Serafina?" he asked, his voice a husky whisper that was almost lost in the howl of the wind. She started, her voice trembling. "I am not used to gentleness." "And what are you used to?" he pressed, taking a step closer. The lodge suddenly felt impossibly small. "Cruelty," she whispered, the word a bitter taste in her mouth. "Indifference. I am used to being taken, not offered." He was so close now she could feel the heat radiating from his body. He reached out, his hand hovering just inches from her face. She could see the battle in his eyes, the fierce desire warring with his iron control. He wanted her. The knowledge was a heady, terrifying power. And God help her, she wanted him too. She wanted to be consumed by his fire, to surrender to the wildness she saw reflected in his eyes. "I will not take," he vowed, his voice thick with emotion. "When you come to me, you will come as the storm comes to the plains. Willingly, fiercely, completely." He lowered his hand, his control winning out. But the promise of his words hung in the air, a sacred vow. He was not just waiting for her trust. He was waiting for her to unleash her own storm, to meet his fire with her own. And Serafina knew, with a certainty that shook her to her very foundations, that one day soon she would. Part 3. The Breaking of the Dam. The storm passed, leaving the air washed clean and the earth smelling of rain and new life. But the storm inside Serafina had not abated. Caleb's words, his raw and impassioned promise, had broken something open inside her. The carefully constructed walls around her heart had been breached, and a flood of emotions, wild and tumultuous, rushed in. Fear, desire, hope, and a desperate, aching longing all swirled together in a chaotic torrent. She avoided him for days, unable to meet his intense gaze without feeling the blush of heat on her cheeks, the frantic thrum of her own pulse. She threw herself into the life of the camp, working alongside the women, her hands busy, but her mind consumed with thoughts of the warrior who had seen the fire within her. She learned to bead intricate patterns onto moccasins, to tan hides until they were buttery soft, to listen to the ancient stories of the people who had given her refuge. She was becoming part of the fabric of the tribe, yet she felt a profound and aching separateness, a loneliness that only one person could assuage. Caleb, for his part, gave her space. He returned to his quiet routines, his silence once again a palpable presence. But now, it was not a silence of indifference, but one of patient, coiled waiting. He was a predator, confident in his power, waiting for his moment. And Seraphina, despite her fear, found herself drawn to that power, to the promise of a passion that would match her own fiery spirit. One evening, she saw him returning from a hunt, his stride uneven, a dark stain of blood spreading across his buckskin shirt. A guttural cry of alarm escaped her lips before she could stop it. She ran to him, her heart pounding with a fear that was sharp and piercing. "You are hurt," she said, her voice tight with panic. He looked down at the gash on his shoulder, a deep cut from a wild boar's tusk, his expression one of mild annoyance rather than pain. "It is nothing. It is not nothing," she countered, her fear morphing into a fierce anger. "You are bleeding. Why did you not call for help?" She led him to his lodge, her touch firm on his arm. She pushed him down onto the furs and immediately set about tending to his wound, her movements deft and sure. She cleaned the gash with water and herbs, her touch surprisingly gentle. As she worked, a single tear escaped her eye, tracing a path through the grime on her cheek. He reached up, his hand catching the tear with his thumb. "Why do you cry, little hawk?" he asked, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "Because you are reckless," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed emotion. "Because you walk through this world as if you are invincible and you are not. And the thought of this world without you in it." She couldn't finish the sentence. The thought was a gaping wound in her own soul. His eyes searched hers, a universe of unspoken emotions passing between them. He saw it then, the depth of her feeling, the raw, untamed love that she had tried so hard to deny. His iron control, the dam he had built around his own fierce passions, finally broke. He pulled her to him, his mouth crashing down on hers in a kiss that was both savage and tender. It was a kiss of desperation, of longing, of a hunger that had been denied for too long. Seraphina gasped, surrendering to the onslaught, her own pent-up desires erupting in a fiery explosion. She wrapped her arms around his neck, her fingers tangling in his long, dark hair, pulling him closer. The kiss was a wild, desperate conversation, a story of two lonely souls who had finally found their counterpart. It was a promise of a love that would not be gentle or tame, but fierce and all-consuming. A love that would burn as brightly and as wildly as the untamed land around them. When they finally broke apart, breathless and trembling, he rested his forehead against hers. "I have waited a lifetime for you, Seraphina," he breathed, his voice raw with an emotion that mirrored her own. "And I for you," she whispered, her heart soaring with a joy so fierce it was painful. That night, there were no more barriers between them, no more silent waiting. They came together not as captor and captive, but as equals, two powerful forces of nature colliding in a tempest of passion. Their lovemaking was a storm, a wild and beautiful dance of two spirits who had finally found their home in one another. In the dying embers of the fire, under the vast, star-dusted canopy of the plains, Seraphina was no longer the girl with the serpent's tongue, the unwanted burden. She was a woman, loved fiercely and completely, a warrior's mate, her fire not just seen, but cherished, worshipped, and matched. She had not been broken by the world. She had been forged in its crucible, and in the arms of her warrior, she had finally, truly come alive. Part 4. A name forged in fire. In the aftermath of their storm, a new world was born. The love between Seraphina and Caleb was a living thing, a wild and beautiful fire that warmed their lodge and radiated outwards, touching everyone in the tribe. There was a new light in Seraphina's eyes, a confidence in her step. The haunted, hunted look was gone, replaced by the fierce, proud serenity of a woman who knows she is loved. Their passion was not a secret, fleeting thing. It was a bold declaration, woven into the fabric of their daily lives. It was in the lingering touches, the shared glances across the fire that crackled with unspoken meaning. The way he would bring her the first wild plum of the season, The way she would mend his moccasins with stitches that were a prayer for his safety. Theirs was a wild love, yes, but it was also a love of profound tenderness and deep abiding respect. One day, as they sat by a stream, their hands intertwined, Serafina asked him about the scar that curved like a crescent moon beneath his jaw. He had never spoken of it, and she had never dared to ask. He traced the scar with his finger, his eyes distant, lost in a memory. "I was young," he said, his voice a low murmur, full of fire and foolish pride. A rival warrior from another band, a man named Takala, sought to prove his strength. He challenged me, not to a fight for honor, but to a raid on a settler's cabin. He said it was a test of courage. He paused, his jaw tightening. I refused. There was no honor in attacking a family. He called me a coward. To prove him wrong, I went to the cabin, not to raid, but to warn them. I was too late. Takala and his men were already there. I fought them, not for glory, but to protect those who could not protect themselves. He looked at her, his eyes dark with the memory. I earned this scar protecting a woman and her child from Takala's blade. Serafina's heart ached for the boy he had been, the young warrior who had chosen honor over pride. She brought his hand to her lips, kissing the scarred knuckles. "You have always been a protector," she whispered. "And you," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "are the one I was born to protect. But more than that, you are the one I was born to stand beside. My equal, my flame." The name Serafina felt like a relic from another life, a name given to her by people who had never truly seen her. It was the name of the girl who had been broken. It was not the name of the woman she was becoming. "I do not feel like Serafina anymore," she confessed to him one night, as they lay tangled in furs, the fire casting a warm glow on their skin. "A name is a path," he said, his fingers tracing the curve of her spine. "When the path changes, the name must change with it. What would you be called, my love?" She thought of the hawk he had carved for her, the symbol of her untamed spirit. But there was more to her now than just fire and rage. There was a deep, abiding peace, a sense of belonging she had never known. She was a storm, yes, but she was also the quiet earth after the rain. "I do not know," she admitted. "Who am I, Caleb?" He was silent for a long time, his eyes searching hers in the firelight. Then he rose and went to his carving tools. He worked through the night, the soft scrape of his knife a soothing lullaby. When the first rays of dawn painted the sky, he came back to her. He pressed a new carving into her hand. It was not a hawk. It was a dove, its wings spread wide in flight, and nestled on its back was a hawk, its fierce eyes watchful. The two birds, one of peace, one of fire, flew as one. "I call you Akachita," he said, his voice a reverent whisper. "It means she who fights with fire, and I call you Wiyaka, for the peace you have brought to my soul. You are both, the storm and the calm, the warrior and the haven. You are my Akechitita, my Wiyaka." Tears streamed down her face, tears not of sorrow, but of a joy so profound it was painful. He had not just given her a name, he had given her back to herself. He had seen all the broken, disparate pieces of her, the rage, the fear, the softness, the strength, and had shown her how they fit together to create a beautiful, powerful whole. She was no longer Serafina. She was Akachita. She was Wiyaka. And she was home. Part 5. The Ghost of a Forgotten Life. The arrival of the white trader was an ugly intrusion, a specter from the world that had spat Serafina out. He was a man named Silas, with a greasy beard and small, avaricious eyes that roamed over the Lakota women, with a proprietary air. When his gaze fell on Serafina, a smug, contemptuous smirk twisted his lips. "Well, I'll be," he drawled, his voice thick with condescension. "Didn't expect to find a white rose growing in a patch of weeds." Caleb moved to stand beside her, his body a silent, formidable shield. His hand rested on the hilt of his knife, a subtle but unmistakable warning. Serafina, however, felt a cold, hard anger solidify in her gut. This was her battle. She placed a hand on Caleb's arm, a silent request for him to let her handle it. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, his trust in her absolute. "This patch of weeds is my home," Seraphina said, her voice clear and cold as a mountain stream. "And I am no rose. I am the thorns that protect it." Silas blinked, taken aback by the venom in her tone. He let out a nervous chuckle. "Feisty one, ain't ya? No harm intended. Just surprised to see a decent woman so far from civilization." Seraphina laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Was it civilized when my own kin traded me for a knife because my tongue was too sharp for their liking? Was it civilized when they left me to starve? I have found more civilization in the heart of this warrior," she said, her voice ringing with a fierce, unwavering pride as she looked at Caleb, "than I ever found in the world you came from." Her words were a whip, and Silas flinched as if struck. He mumbled an apology, finished his trading in a hurry, and left the camp without a backward glance, his smugness replaced by a grudging respect. The incident was a turning point for Seraphina. She had not shrunk from the ghost of her past. She had faced it down, her voice her weapon, her love for Caleb her shield. She had spoken not as a victim, but as a warrior in her own right. But the past was not done with her yet. Weeks later, another rider appeared on the horizon. As he drew closer, a cold dread washed over Seraphina. It was her cousin, Jonah, the son of the uncle who had cast her out. He wore the black coat of a preacher, his face a mask of pious self-righteousness. "Miriam," he called out, using her old name, the name of the girl she had been. The name felt like a shroud. "That is not my name," she said, her voice low and steady. Caleb was at her side in an instant, a silent, unmovable mountain of support. "I have come to save you," Jonah announced, his voice booming with a false authority. "To bring you back to God's grace, away from these savages." "Save me?" Seraphina's laugh was incredulous. "You have come to drag me back to the cage I escaped. I have found more grace in the whisper of the wind on these plains than I ever found in your church. I have found more God in the heart of this one man than in all your hollow sermons." "He has bewitched you," Jonah spat, his piety slipping to reveal the ugly prejudice beneath. "This is an unholy union. You are living in sin." "Sin," she countered, her voice rising with a fiery passion. "Is it a sin to be loved? To be cherished? To be seen for who I am, not for what you wanted me to be? Our love is not a sin, Jonah. It is a sacrament. It is wild and holy and true. Something you, with your cold heart and your empty words, will never understand." She stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "Look at me, cousin. Do I look like a woman in need of saving?" She stood before him, proud and defiant, her hair braided with shells, her skin bronzed by the sun, her body strong and alive. She was no longer the pale, frightened girl he remembered. She was a force of nature, a woman forged in the fires of adversity and love. Jonah was speechless. He saw before him not a lost soul, but a queen in her own kingdom, a warrior who had found her tribe. He saw the fierce, protective love in Caleb's eyes, a love that would burn to ashes anyone who dared to harm her. Defeated, he turned his horse and rode away, a black crow fleeing from a pair of eagles. Seraphina watched him go, a sense of finality washing over her. The last ghost of her forgotten life had been banished. She turned to Caleb, her heart overflowing with a love so fierce it was a physical ache. "It is done," she whispered. He pulled her into his arms, his embrace a safe harbor. "You did not need me to fight your battles," he said, his voice thick with pride. "No," she agreed, tilting her face up to his. "But I will always need you to stand beside me as I fight them." He lowered his head and kissed her, a kiss of shared victory, of a love that had been tested and had emerged, unbreakable and triumphant. Part 6. A home built by two fires. The seasons turned, and Seraphina's life, once a barren wasteland, was now a fertile garden, blooming with love and a profound sense of belonging. With Caleb at her side, she was not just surviving, she was thriving. She was Akacheta, the warrior, and Wiyaka, the peacemaker. The two halves of her soul had finally found their balance. Together, she and Caleb built a new lodge, a home forged not just from wood and hide, but from their shared dreams and the unbreakable bonds of their love. Every pole they raised, every skin they stitched, was a testament to their union. Seraphina's hands, once soft and useless, were now strong and capable, calloused from work, but gentle in their touch. She had built a life here, a life of purpose and meaning. The day they finished the lodge, the entire tribe gathered to celebrate. Awanji lit the first fire in their new home, her voice a low, melodic chant, as she offered a blessing for a life of happiness, abundance, and many children. The air was filled with the sound of drums, of laughter, of joyous celebration. As the sun set, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple, Caleb knelt before Seraphina. He did not offer her a ring or a trinket from the white man's world. He offered her something far more precious. He opened his hands, and in his palm lay two carvings, the hawk and the dove, and a new one, a tiny, exquisitely carved cradle. "Our home is built," he said, his voice thick with an emotion that mirrored the joyous ache in her own heart. "Now, let us fill it with life. Let us fill it with love. Be my wife, Akachita, my mate, the mother of my children, the other half of my soul." Tears of pure, unadulterated joy streamed down Seraphina's face. She had been given away once, a worthless object to be discarded. Now, she was being asked, with reverence and adoration, to be the center of a man's world, the heart of his home. "Yes," she breathed, the word a prayer, a vow, a song of triumph. "Yes, my love, forever, yes." He rose and pulled her into his arms, swinging her around as the tribe cheered, their voices rising in a joyous chorus. He kissed her, a deep, passionate kiss that sealed their promise, a kiss that spoke of a future filled with a love as vast and as untamed as the western sky. Their life together was a wild and beautiful song. It was a life of harsh winters and sun-drenched summers, of struggle and triumph, of quiet moments of tenderness and fierce, passionate nights. They faced every challenge together, their love a formidable shield against the hardships of the world. Seraphina, now known to all as Akachita, became a respected voice in the tribe, her wisdom and her fiery spirit a source of strength for her people. Caleb, with his queen at his side, led with a quiet authority and a deep, abiding love for his family. They filled their home with laughter, with the pitter-patter of small feet, with a love that was a living, breathing testament to the power of a warrior's choice and a woman's flame. Seraphina, the girl who had been cast out, had not just found a home, she had become one. She was the heart of her family, the fire in her warrior's soul, a legend whispered on the wind, a story of a love so wild and so true it had reshaped the world. She had walked through the fire, and instead of being burned, she had learned to command the flames, building a life of extraordinary beauty and untamed passion from the ashes of her past. In the heart of the untamed West, a profound truth was forged in the fire of an unlikely love. True love is not about possession, but about liberation. It is not a cage, however gilded, but a pair of wings. It is the act of seeing the wild, untamable fire in another's soul, and not seeking to quench it, but to match it with your own. Caleb did not rescue the broken girl. He stood beside the warrior as she rose, recognizing that her strength was not a threat to his, but its perfect complement. Seraphina's journey from a shamed outcast to a revered matriarch teaches us that our deepest wounds can become the source of our greatest power, and that a home is not a place you are given, but a sanctuary you build within the heart of another. The greatest stories are not about being saved, but about being seen. Thank you for joining us for this tale from the heart of the frontier. If this story stirred your soul, please show your support by liking this video, sharing it with others, and subscribing to Wild West Stories for more true-hearted tales.